Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you're all well today. I've sat down today to just give you a friendly reminder that the Romans were right about actors. As Wikipedia very helpfully reminds us here, infamia, which was a social status, both legal, legal and social status in the Roman Empire and Republic, was an inescapable consequence for certain kinds of employment, including that of undertakers, executioners, prostitutes and pimps, and entertainers such as actors and dancers and gladiators, who were slaves, right? It has, in many societies, actually, not just with the Romans as well, actors have always had a kind of social stigma about them, right? Not always. Sort of as you get towards the end of the Victorian era and the beginning of the 20th century, and really into our own time, the actor is a type of celebrity, right? It's something that's aspirational. It's something that you should want to be, because not only does it give you the opportunity for your face to be plastered everywhere and your talent, your extraordinary talent, to be on display for the entire world to see, but also actors have historically always been a tool to achieve social change. And this is something that the Romans understood very, very well. And you see many Roman writers from the time attributing, not solely, but certainly in part, the work of actors and the theatres to social and moral decay throughout the Roman Empire that is trying to hold up loftier and higher ideals. When we look at the work of Seneca, I believe it is, commenting on Nero and other such writers of the time, the idea that Nero wanted to act was seen as a very, very bad thing, right? That was a real mark of shame against his character, because the idea is that though an actor can mimic and pretend to hold certain opinions and emote certain things, they don't really feel it for themselves, right? You can act shameful without actually possessing any amount of shame yourself. And so you can see as time goes on, when Augustus became the first emperor of Rome, one of the laws that was passed in the Lex Julia laws was basically prohibiting senators from marrying actresses, because, of course, why would you degrade yourself in such a way and open yourself up to that kind of corruption? So why am I telling you all this? Where is all of this coming from? Well, the fact of the matter is that I, of course, as you know, come from an acting background myself. I studied at drama school for my sins for not 3 but 4 years, and got myself, and regrettably the taxpayer, into a considerable amount of debt over it all. But whilst I spent a lot of time at drama school, it certainly gave me a window into not only the advantages and wonder of acting, which I do wholeheartedly believe in. I think that to stand on the stage and entertain many people and give them a good night out is a wonderful thing, a wholesome thing at that, especially when we think about such great British institutions such as a pantomime or a night of Shakespeare, or, any of the great playwrights that are, of course, known, and some of which I go through on my show Chronicles and talk about. But within all of that as well, there is a feeling that, and this was particularly prevalent at the time when the lockdowns were going on, that you saw a great deal from the acting world and their institutions being very, very angry at the government at the time for not subsidizing the arts more. But the thing is, isn't it all just total propaganda? And not just propaganda, because in a way, all art can be conceived of as propaganda, if you wanted to be cynical about it, but it's always propaganda of a certain flavour. And that flavour is progressivism, right? It's always left-leaning in this day and age. It's always subversive. And there's very, very little reactionary content that gets made. And I'm certainly not the first person to realise this, and I surely won't be the last. So let's now talk about this article. So we can see here Jonathan Pryce. Now, let's not beat about the bush. Jonathan Pryce is a tremendous actor, a very, very good actor. Brazil was one of my personal favourite films of his. But it always seems to be that actors are always pushed by outlets like The Guardian. And why wouldn't they be, seeing as actors are the performance arm of The Guardian itself? And so you have here Jonathan Pryce saying, making a drama about refugees could diffuse anti-migrant anger in the UK, says Jonathan Pryce. Well, I don't think it will, for one. I don't think it's work. But the point is not whether it will work or not. The point is that the intent to make it, right? So you can see here, a compelling drama about refugees living in Britain could be one way to diffuse the rising anger and anti-migrant sentiment in the United Kingdom, according to Jonathan Pryce, who said great TV or film could open up the issue. Pryce told The Guardian that at present the British public has no idea about the day-to-day realities for people living in migrant hotels. I think they do, actually, Jonathan. I think they do. And they're certainly very, very aware of what that reality means for their own children in Epping, in Southport, in many, many places where, not just because later on he shows that he doesn't much care for the distinction between legal and illegal migration. So I don't see why I should either. Let's just say all migration in this particular case. So Southport, Epping, and every other example under the sun of where migration has created conflict, strife, and murder, right? All of the terrible things that it's basically brought to our country and disinherited us from what was our birthright, which was to live in a Britain that was safe, homogenous, and took pride in itself, right? That gave itself dignity, a dignity that our ancestors, who have been here for centuries and centuries, worked generations and generations for to make this island as peaceful as possible. But as he says, people aren't aware of the facts concerning the homeless, concerning immigrants, legal or otherwise. And so this sort of fear and anger builds up about something they don't really know anything about. And as I say, I find this framing remarkable because actually you can see here, Jonathan is attributing what I'm sure he would label xenophobia, bigotry, and racism to a lack of information, right? It's about the public are misinformed, and what they are afraid of is the unknown, when actually the truth of the matter is that what the public are fearful of is the known, right? It's what we know. It's the day-to-day interactions that we have with many of these people. And he says it's an issue that does need to be opened up and explored to a greater extent. And it has to be through drama, which is often the best way to tell somebody's emotional story. And that's the point, isn't it? The truth is the truth, the real political reality, is not what you experience when you go out into your streets every day. When I walk down Swindon High Street to work and I see what I see, and what you see when you're going through Peckham and Barking and Birmingham and all of these places. No, the truth, the emotional truth of the issue is what we can sit down at a desk and meticulously plan out in writing, in trapping, in emotionally, I really have to force that, emotionally manipulating you through a whole industry working together to basically convince you not to believe your lying eyes. That's what it comes down to. And you would think that an industry that cared about the human experience or cared about truth might, on some level, be interested in the truth about demographic replacement or alienation in our own towns and cities. And though the acting industry and directors and all these sorts of people do care about those things and have written about such realities in media such as This Is England, for example, very famous example set in the 80s where you have Stephen Graham's character from the National Front. It is always because, well, we need to give lip service to these people, but ultimately it's propaganda designed to prove why they're wrong, we're right, and really these people are an obstacle to be overcome, not to be understood. And really, as time goes on, the industry has become only more and more full of itself, its own hubris, and its own sense of correctness, where now you just see all of this being pumped out 24/7. We can't obviously forget as well the ringing endorsement that Adolescents recently had on Netflix, created entirely with the approval of the Starmer government. And, you know, they got meetings at Downing Street and they got awards. And of course they would, because they're pushing at an open door. It was a series waiting to be made so that the awards could simply be given to it and the government could use it to suit their own political means. And this is something that you constantly see as well when it comes to the acting industry. Though they see themselves as trailblazers and pioneers, really everything that they seem to believe in, whether it's environmentalism, whether or not it's social justice, the establishment already agrees with them. They already agree with these presuppositions. What they don't agree with are the things that, honestly, like, remember back when Lawrence Fox lost his entire acting career just because he said he didn't think Britain was a racist country, right? And Equity, the actors' union, basically blacklisted him for that comment. And I can tell you, there are opinions out there far stronger and more right-wing than Lawrence Fox's that represent the public opinion right about now. And, well, that's a problem that they're going to have to come to grips with. You see already the way that the BBC and their arts and all the shows that they're putting out are continually just falling into greater and greater distrust and skepticism, and people want nothing to do with them. They don't want state-funded propaganda. They want to put their money in shows, programs, and things that they can actually enjoy and they feel represent them. But what's more, you can see here when Jonathan Pryce is saying, oh, well, a film needs to be made about this sort of thing that will consider the plight of refugees. We actually already had that film, Jonathan. It was a Ken Loach film, again, left-wing director and director of Kes, classic British film back in the good old days. And he made a film called The Old Oak, which was a film entirely basically about Middle Easterners moving into English neighborhoods and basically saying, can't we all come together? Are we really that different? I'm afraid we are, Ken, actually. I'm afraid we are. And you can see more and more now, as we've covered recently with what's happened in Manchester, these differences, different ethnic tensions, historical tensions playing out on the streets, not just between the English, the right-wing gammons, and the new arrivals, but between the different factions of new arrivals themselves. And so, well, what are you going to do about it? Because really, the theatre industry and actors, by and large, of course, there are more right-wing actors, but they tend to be more from America, right? Like Zachary Levi, Gina Carano, these sorts of people who have, again, had, you know, their own struggles in Hollywood, but I would suggest that actually in Britain, the industry is even more insular, even more protected, and within its own bubble, actually. And so you end up with theatre being created like this. And could there possibly be a more fitting title than Death of England, which was a trilogy of plays that were created? And let's just read you through what this trilogy was about. So, overall, this series of plays is about modern life, from family, race, class, and national identity through to Brexit, Black Lives Matter, the pandemic, and more. But Dyer and Williams cleverly tackle those huge subjects through the prism of a few individual experiences, drawing us into their riveting stories. The Death of England Michael is a monologue shared by the titular white working-class character. His dad has just died suddenly, but it soon transpires that theirs was a complex relationship. His father, an East End flower stall holder and football fanatic, was a racist Leave supporter, while Michael secretly voted Remain, and his best mate Delroy is black, but that inheritance might not be so easy to escape, because it's a sin, right? The fictional father feeling protective of England is a sin, and obviously Michael needs to atone for it by becoming more inclusive, more welcoming, and basically just stepping back. And so this is the point. Everything about the way that the industry works, it's predetermined. They have the answers, they simply need you to believe them. And the problem is that their answers just aren't convincing and don't bear any resemblance to the reality, as I say. We pick up the narrative in a second monologue, Delroy. Now we hear from Michael's mate, who is just as complex, a Brexit supporter, and a once successful bailiff who has spiraled into unemployment and drinking. He's in a relationship with Michael's sister Carly, but when she goes into labour, police racially profiling means he might not make the birth. And so again, it's just total propaganda. And this did really well. This was on in London and is, of course, the exact thing that Londoners would flock to go and see. But there's really no legroom for the arts to push back against this, particularly when you have state projects like the Arts Council, who constantly pick and choose what they will fund for ideological reasons. And I needn't tell you that those ideologies don't exactly correspond with those of yourself, dear viewer. So, yeah, a sad state of affairs that the acting industry is in right now. And ultimately, I feel like the acting industry really has nowhere left to run, right? It is either going to have to reconcile itself with the populist energy, right? And the fact that actually it is a minority preaching to the majority of the public at this point, or it's going to have to find itself in a industry of increasing irrelevance and isolation as the people of patriots of this country just go about the business of restoring this house to proper order, damn what the actors and preachers say. And by that point, well, maybe actors will return to being just as trusted as they were by the Romans.